traditionally, many branches of yoga are very partialized, they're very specialized, and they are interested in trying to achieve certain special conditions of consciousness which are considered to be optimum for this investigation, states of meditation or states of, diminished thinking, states of, various kinds of trances and so on and so forth. But of course, what consciousness is, what reality is, what experience is always true, whatever it is. I mean, you can be pissed off and being cut off in traffic and be mad without having to fight with your spouse and be whatever, and that's experience too. That's as real as sitting in meditation, doing a Sanskrit chant and visualizing lotus flowers or something. So basically, there goes the solar system. So basically,
this group attacks the solar system.
So basically, why not use any experience as a vehicle for investigation of what experience is, a vehicle for investigating what reality is? And of course, that would be much more efficient, because then you don't have to spend years and years cultivating some rarefied state of consciousness that seems to be difficult to cultivate, and seems to have dubious return on your investment anyway, because even once you become an expert meditator, there you are, and you're meditating, and you're an expert meditator for 20 years, and then so what? Where good does that get you? Of course, this comes very naturally to us, very easily to us, because we're so used to approaching our experience in terms of qualifying it, this versus that. This is better than that. Happy is better than sad. Pleasure is better than pain. Relaxed is better than uptight. So on and so forth. So we have all of these extreme, polarizations that we spontaneously and effortlessly and with great enthusiasm, or lack thereof, cultivate and approach our experience in terms of just as second nature. We do it automatically. We just take it for granted. This is normal human functioning, is to, of course, good is better than bad because it's good. Who wants bad? And so on and so forth. And so this way of thinking, this this mode of gamesmanship where we play our experience off against itself, which makes perfectly good sense in its own terms, is actually, it turns out to be the problem in terms of investigating what experience itself is. Because the gross layers of this kind of a bias, this kind of a qualification, are fairly obvious and easy to see through, but the subtle layers, which can go all the way down and become very, very subtle, can become really problematic in terms of holding some subtle bias about experience being this way or that way, or being, better this way or that way. And any partializing like this, any qualifying of experience, impedes seeing what experience actually is, seeing what consciousness actually is. So, what to do about that? What's the answer? So anyway,
in the field.
That's just what I was going to say. Wow, you must be psychic. So anyway, fortunately, it happens that even as all of this qualifying of experience and all this partializing experience is going on in the mind, simultaneously, a background of unqualified experience is always present. In sort of pop psychological terms, we might qualify that as a conscious mind versus the unconscious mind, or what have you. But all that aside, the fact remains that experience consciousness multitasks. vastly and multitask hugely and multitask all over the place. So it's always operating in many modes, many very different modes simultaneously. And these modes are not mutually exclusive, as might be thought. You know, a simplistic spiritual beginner might think, oh, you're either meditating or you're not meditating. You know, you're either calm or you're not. And in actuality, that's hogwash, because even when the mind is busy, there's aspects of the mind which are not engaged in thought. You know, even when the emotions are torqued up, there's aspects of the experience of the energy that are not engaged in those ways. So you could say every energy flavor within consciousness, every energy flavor within experience always exists in the background or in a context that is not it, that is other than it. So, you know, conscious thought exists in the background that is not conscious thought, and so on and so forth. So the offshoot of all this and the practical aspect of all this is that any mode of consciousness that might be convenient is always available, because it's always actually happening in real time. It's not like you need to switch gears and stop something and start something else, which would be the simplistic way of understanding that. And so basically what I recommend is taking advantage of that fact. And in the case of looking at raw, unbiased experience, right now, everyone is experiencing raw, unbiased experience. You may have a mind that's effortless, churning away and effortlessly categorizing and qualifying everything, having opinion about things and this and that. And all that goes on, sure. I mean, that's part of having a human personality, a human mind. It's spontaneous. But even when that's happening, that's not all that's happening. And that's happening in a context which is other than itself. Now, granted, the challenge may be that people are so used to focusing on the part of the mind that's being consciously identified with, the part of the mind that is doing all the qualifying and thinking and so on and so forth, that it may require a bit of a learning curve or a bit of a exploration to discover the knack of sort of feeling the background modes, feeling alternative modes of experience that are, in fact, always actually occurring in real time. The advantage of doing so is that when you discover what is actually going on, what experience actually is, it turns out to be beyond your wildest dreams, as a vast and inconceivable deviation from what human consensus reality supposes is going on here. You know, this has been called in different contexts. This has been called self-realization, enlightenment, liberation. You know, blah 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 blah. All these you know glorified terms which are thrown at it, and they're all basically true. This does reveal the pinnacle of human experience, because it reveals what this actually is, which is beyond human experience. Experience is not a human phenomenon. Humans occur within the context of experience, but experience itself is transient. Experience arises from the same thing that the universe arises from the Big Bang. It arises from the primal energy phenomena of the totality of reality. And that's true of your experience right here, right now. So the human portion of your experience is kind of like an island. It's like the island, like Hawaii or something. It's there above the water, and it's sitting there, and it's very insular, and it's surrounded, and it's limited, and you can point to it and say, yes, it's an awful lot of water and an awful little island. But in actuality, it goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down, and you try and find the end of it, and there's no end. It just goes on forever. But anyway, all that is useless theorizing unless you find it for yourself, which is the whole point of this yoga. So, So the basic mode of experience, the raw event of experience itself, is irrational. It makes no sense. It's not logical. It's not something. It's not amenable to analysis. It's not something you can put in a sentence or wrap your head around. But it's actually very easy to engage with and to recognize in its own nature, because you yourself are simultaneously not logical, not rational, not limited to normal modes of human functioning. Your basic consciousness, your genetic consciousness, your consciousness that that is a direct outgrowth of your DNA and so on and so forth, which is functioning right here, right now, is much more primal than sort of the evolved human forebrain conscious mind kind of functioning that we're mostly used to hanging out in. And so, even though what this is largely terra incognita in terms of making any sense of it, that's not actually an issue, because you don't need to make sense of it, because you don't make any sense either. When you get down to what you really are, when you get down to the life force, when you get down to the primal arising of consciousness and so on and so forth. Anyway, all of that to talk about is a lot of abstractions. But experience itself is not an abstraction. This that's right here, this actuality, this is appearing as your experience, I suppose. I should talk first person. It's appearing as my experience, because I don't know if you exist at all. This actuality that's appearing as my experience is not a concept. It's not an abstraction. It is supremely actual. It is absolutely present. It's undeniably real. It's the criteria of what is real. If someone says what's real, well, the touchstone of reality is ultimately experience. If someone said, "Oh, there's pink elephants dancing in circles around the room," I'd say, "You're full of shit. They're not real, because I don't experience them. I can experience the thought of pink elephants." If you said the thought of pink elephants is dancing around them, I can go, "Okay, I can go there." But I don't see any damn pink elephants, so that's just not real. You're nuts, or pulling a fast one or something. But this that's here is actual. This is real. In what way is this here? How is this here? What is this presence that is here? It's present as experience. It's present to my consciousness, let's say. Not that I can find my consciousness. We used to saying that, consciousness experiences objects of consciousness or whatever, right? The field of experience, what have you. But that's just a logical circumlocution. You can't actually find consciousness. You can't lose it, because it doesn't go anywhere. Here it is, right? But you can't find consciousness as a separate thing. It's just an assertion. It's an assumption that, there must be consciousness because this is being perceived. Well, there certainly is perceiving, but why does it need mechanism? Why does there have to be a perceiver and a perceived? Why not just perceiving? Well, that makes no sense. This makes so much sense that this is here. The fact of presence, the fact of being, makes absolutely no sense. And yet it's actual, it's real, it's concrete. So, the presence of experience is not a logical phenomenon. There's no explanation for it. It's not. You can't rationalize it. It's just it's a given. It's the given. The given is that my experience is, right? And I assume that's the same for you. And ultimately, that's the only given. So this is the starting point, and also it happens, not surprisingly, the ending point of yoga is to look at this actuality just as it is, however it happens to be, and see what it is. And it's actually very easy to see what it is, but as I touched on obliquely earlier, the challenge is not to see what this is. The challenge is to let go of the your biases and assumptions and beliefs that you think you already know what it is. And of course, we don't hold those consciously either. So it can be challenging. It can be slippery. It can be an art form to somehow undercut that layer or level or what have you of experiencing, of the way you sit in your energy field, to get to a more primal layer, so to speak, where those biases just don't apply. But again, it's doable because that primal layer is right here. And you are already on that primal layer, so it's not something you need to do. It's more just kind of a tuning in. I can't tell if I'm being more systematic than usual tonight or less systematic. Anyway, that's just sort of a very quick overview of what I'm about. And if you'd like, we can spend the rest of the evening discussing any aspects of that, or implications of that you find interesting. Yeah.
Peter, I after the retreat last week, two things. That, and then Sunday I went to a religious center here in Santa Cruz, and I met a woman who's she's taking, not ordination, but she's taking vows and so forth.
Uh-huh.
And after the retreat, your articulation and your ability to speak the unspeakable, point the unspeakable, I don't think that is a good greater skill in being presented. At the same time, I can only speak for myself. And I understand that I have, in this body mind that I'm going to talk, there are perhaps deeper, more pressures, more unwholesome, or whatever, more gnarly obstacles than
Gnarly is actually quite a good technical term. I like it.
But nonetheless, all the afflictions are all variations of this extreme that all beings, humans or some kind of expression, have roughly everything has to burn it, prey on. And I don't see a catch-22 with saying simply the mere noticing of radiant presence undercuts all of that. It's a recognition of things as they seem.
Yeah.
And yet, it certainly has it in my experience that I can.
We are here with the Pasquales who are looking to save money on their wireless plans, right guys?
Yes.
And Olivia's going to tell us about it.
Our lowest price unlimited plan is only $39.80.
Definition that doesn't seem to have any real laser-like power to change anything. But I've had hearing you for I've had to bring other things to the table that are more traditional actual practices. And I do give that to my ability. And those really seem to help. Those seem to have a certain cutting power that if I hindered that, I wouldn't be able to do it alone. So, the Dalai Lama years ago, he was asked, talked to Dave that which is more important? Remember, happiness or karma? He actually told the audience karma, quite but the power of action, the power of speech, the power of mind, that's what defines our experience. But that filters and reifies, and causes the network of amplification. And what you think is it's absolutely true. I can't really do that. I'm barely able to share you a little bit here with the point 22 at all. It's more faint information. So, maybe off to a Lima Center or off to doing whatever do there, but you don't really miss the traditional protocol, but you certainly don't offer that. You're going to implement a very high level situation. It's by itself not enough to
that may or may not be the case. Who knows? I mean, your life is an art form, and it's your art form ultimately to explore and engage with, and as your genius, as your inspiration inspires, and by all means have at it. One thing I would say is, whatever you do, I would strongly recommend to keep flirting with this stuff, and because it is cumulative and it may not be instantaneous. I mean, it's always instantaneous, but that's kind of a joke. But it may seem to require a lot of visitations over a period of time, but then of course the traditional practices are the same thing. So.
Yeah, it's just the profundity of, as I've referred to before, the situation of being where one's mind can literally think what and ignore. And there's some people that say, can't speak very well. Some people say they're very easy. They're very almost effortless.
When you say this, what do you mean in that?
Coming to this approach, where it seems to often take a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline, a lot of people spend years, whatever retreat,
well, there's a lot of that happening, but a lot of that doesn't result in realization either. So, I mean, the Buddhist claim is there's an assembly line, and if you go on the assembly line, it's going to end up at realization. And, it's kind of a hard thing to disprove. But you don't see an awful lot of realized Buddhists walking around. Even when the Dalai Lama claims to not be realized.
Well, I think that's just his systematic motive.
Well, that may be so, but if he's denying it anyway, so I mean, it's, maybe they're all realized and they're all just very, very humble and denying it, and that's, who knows? That's fine. I'm not trying to gainsay that. And like I said, the basically, it's up to you to, there's opportunity. Spirituality is opportunity, and it's down to luck, inspiration, and caprice, the degree to which you can take advantage of that opportunity. And also when. You may be able to take advantage of that opportunity in some particular moment on some particular day, unexpectedly, and wow, there you go. And none of it is predictable. Because as you say, experience is insane. Experience flies around with absolute limitless apparition, absolute zero persistence or constancy, ultimately zero resolvability. So it's like, it's like being a total psychotic having visions of all this bizarre stuff, and that's what human life is like, nonstop. And so here you are in this totally out of control, essential insanity, lack of perspective of being in your experience with no outside reference. And what do you do with that? Well, that's the point. What do you do with that? And so it's really just down to opportunity to do anything with it, other than just be doing that. And even the throwing around is actually an opportunity itself.
It may be occurring with too much force.
Well, it's occurring with absolute force. All the force of reality is impinging within everyone's experience.
Well, you many times you have quite a few dialogues where you're inviting me to see the affections and the motions of the mind and so forth as the reading of the song. That's described in traditional effects and so forth.
Sure.
That's very, in fact, at the graduate school, that's never.
It's graduate school in one sense, but in another sense, phrasing it in those terms puts an unnecessary and unrealistic hurdle on it. Because it's not necessarily that. It's just noticing that the energies of experience are energies. And if I feel shitty, there's a feeling shitty is a weird energy appearing in my experience. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where it's going. I don't know how long it's going to be there. It's just a weird energy appearing, which is all we have, is weird energies appearing. And so we're used to playing this game of qualifying, oh, this is an affliction, this is compassion is good, anger is bad, or whatever, all this gamesmanship of qualifying these energies instead of just letting go of them and saying, God, I'm not doing them, they're totally out of control. There's just this sea of weirdness washing through me 24/7 that I call my experience. It's just all these weird energies.
They're arising from causes. Well,
that's a theory. Find a cause. The cause is itself is a weird energy. But at any rate, I'm not trying to argue with you or debate interpretation. All those philosophies are viable and they have their logical basis and all that. I'm just saying that in point of fact, any energy that appears is a jumping off point for discovering its energy. And that applies to energies of clarity and lucidity. It does no less than to energies of anger or rage or self-loathing or frustration or anything else like that. But they're all equally out of control energies.
My experience has been that not until at least some of the gross negativity or whatever I want to call it, it's standing reduced, relief. Even within the possibility of having any clarity, otherwise it's going to being hard in a bunch of weeks.
Okay, well, you give it your best shot. You work with it how it seems appropriate to work with it. And that's the best you can do, of course. So. And everyone's always doing their best, so you're in that boat as well. Yes.
That seems a little ass backwards because it's a theory that you have to clear these things in order to see this. But in fact, how do you know that once you see this and you focus just on that these other things don't drop away? We're giving validity. It's like having a working model or something. A working model is not the thing itself.
Well, all interpretations are not the thing interpreted. The thing interpreted will always transcend interpretations. But you have to come to that for yourself, and that's all.
What is the connection between experience and consciousness?
Well, they're one and the same. Consciousness, there are assertions. There's a claim that there is such a thing as experience and a claim that there is such a thing as consciousness. You can't find anything but experience and you can't find anything but consciousness, so why have two words?
Well, you use both words.
Sure, I use all the words.
It seemed to me, and probably misunderstanding what you were saying, was that one was dependent on the other.
Mm-mm. No, there's no such thing as consciousness. Consciousness is an assertion. For that matter, there's no such thing as experience, but we don't need to go there.
Fine, then
Find that out for yourself.
okay.
Peter, earlier you were talking about some of these biases, they're kind of hard to, as it were, see through.
Yeah.
And, they're gnarly or they're naughty or
Sure. Yeah.
that's a kind of architecture. And then there's what I'm hearing is a notion that, well, let's see, how do we dismantle that?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's what you're saying, just, that's not going to happen.
Well, whether or not
speak for myself.
whether or not it happens, it doesn't matter whether or not it happens, because even when these qualities are present, you don't need to dismantle them because there's portions of your experience where those qualities are not present, and you can just go there. And then it's irrelevant whether they're there. It's as if they were dismantled.
Right. But you were also saying, I thought you were saying that those biases or whatever they are,
But
they have a kind of a baffling effect. They baffle the sense of experience. Because
no, the problem with all these the problem with all these biases and these obsessions is their attractiveness. We're drawn to them. It's like when there's a TV on in your room. When you're in the room, there's a TV on. You ever sit in an airport or something where there's a TV on and there's like, 100 people sitting around, everyone's sitting around.
Right.
And you look at all the faces around you and 80% of them are. Because there's an attractiveness to that level of activity in experience. And likewise, there's an attractiveness to these obsessive orientations within our experience that we go to, just like there's a TV in the room. And so the problem isn't that they're there. The problem is that their seductive power can distract you from getting away from that for long enough to notice that there's more also going on.
Okay, I thought you were also saying, in terms of that bias, the difficulty of getting around it seems like that those biases are kind of wired into our structure.
Absolutely.
As beings. So it's not something you can just think out of.
But that's the point. You don't need
structural.
it's totally, all of it is there, but you don't need to think out of it.
Yeah.
Just go elsewhere.
Yeah.
All of that's there, but it's relatively contained. And when I say relatively contained, I mean in the big picture. It may be huge and vast and seem to take up most of your conscious awareness and so on and so forth. But in fact, that has an outside where these qualities are not present in the same way.
So it's just a persistent architecture, but it's not the...
Yeah. It's a persistent architecture, but it's a subsystem. It's a partial system.
Yeah.
It's not the whole thing. And every system exists in a context that's other than itself. The painting exists against a background that is not the painting. The painting exists against a background that is a frame or whatever, by analogy. But in experiential terms, experience, any particularized experience is bounded. And is bounded in a context that is much vaster than it. And outside of those bounds, the same qualities are not present in the same way. So you're free of that particular orientation.
That sort of explains something that I've been wondering about. I mean, I have had, experiencing more and more, things dropping away, not being in any frame of reference.
Hmm?
But my question is, so all of a sudden I drop back in, so to speak, and there is this frame of reference.
Sure.
But I had I don't know, it's sort of like it's a real paradox, because if I'm operating out of this frame of reference and then I go back, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a frame of reference. But all of a sudden, there it is.
Sure.
That explains
You can't map this stuff. This stuff has no structure. It's totally irrational. It's totally non-spatial. It's like dimensions that strangely coexist and yet have nothing to do with each other. And
Yeah.
so the way, what reality actually is and the way it's structured is completely non-structural.
Right.
And so the sort of the human pretension of being able to sort it all out, even my analogies of how these energies exist in a context and outside that context, all of that is just a very vague metaphor that is useful in a way, but it's not actually true.
But the frame of reference does have a structure.
The frame of reference defines a structure.
Yeah.
Structure exists because of orientation, because of frame of reference. Frames of reference are literally imagined into existence. They're essentially hypnotic.
Yeah. But the thing is that what sort of where when I get, if I sort of notice that I've been operating without a frame of reference, so then I said, well, I'm just imagining, and I just imagine that. That's the only way I can explain operating without a frame of reference. But in reality, I'm imagining the structure.
Yeah. When you find yourself back in a frame of reference, it's not like you went back to something. You literally imagined it into existence.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That was imagined, not...
It's like a dream. When you find yourself in a dream, you're dreaming the dream in real time. It's not like the dream is sitting there somewhere and you go to it. It may seem that way, but it's not really like that. You put the dream there, and all of a sudden it feels like you're going to it.
Yeah.
And all of these different, call them modes of consciousness or orientational frameworks or lack thereof, and so on and so forth. All of these are essentially just spun out, irrationally and transcendently. And there's no structure. It can't be deconstructed. It's not like you can make a map of it or deconstruct a mechanism. But you don't need to. And the whole point is to discover that there is no mechanism. The real powerful fact is what this is entirely transcendental.
Lift lid, twist cap. Effortless meals go well with busy nights. Pick up a refreshing 2-liter Coke. Market.
Make what doesn't make sense make sense, and yet we're experts at doing that. All the sense that we make out of this, all the logic and the orientation we have in this, we put there. I mean, we got chops, we got skills, we got some serious ability to create structure and patterning in this vast infinite chaos that this actually is.
Yeah, so once that really hits, then the sort of the time of experience without that framework, that makes it seem just so much more, it has to be so much more real. It's transcendent. There's no way to explain it.
Thanks very much.
But,
and that's,
to me, that has to be reality.
Well, sure, but that's, it is that whatever it seems to you as, because the seeming is just another orientation.
Yeah.
But that's the whole nature of this yoga. The entirety of this yoga is to touch this irrationality again and again. And you won't be able to set up housekeeping there. You won't be able to hang out there. You'll find yourself going there, and then you'll pop back out into some orientation. That's cool. Just don't worry about it. Just feel it when it's there. Drink it in, and then when you start popping out, just really let go, and just go off wherever you go. Don't worry about it. And sooner or later, you come back to that feeling. And every time you come back, it gets deeper and stronger. It's cumulative. That's the whole nature of the yoga.
Yeah, well, even coming, I say coming out of it, but I mean, is really tricky now too. I can see before my very eyes.
Right.
I'm sort of like I'm dreaming while I'm awake.
Yeah, because you're an advanced yogi, so you're working with this at a very deep level, and basically as you settle into this more and more deeply, you get a more and more intuitive, permeative sense of the flavor of this, even when you're in a more rational frame of reference or orientation to your experience. It's not a matter of getting to any particular mode or modelessness,
right,
or getting away from any particular orientation. It's just a matter of seeing the true context because inevitably experience drifts wildly through these different orientations with itself, and will do so unendingly forever, throughout the eternity of timeless time. That's good. It can be really hard for beginners to understand. Yoga is thought to be the achieving of something, or the solving of something, or the fixing of something, or the leaving of something. It's not that at all. It's just seeing what this is. It doesn't change it one iota. You're still the same, incompetent nerd you were beforehand, and so on and so forth, or whatever. Right? You still have the same, absurd personality quirks and whatever. It's like, who cares? It's not about fixing anything or solving anything or changing anything. It's about seeing what it is. Because it turns out that what it is inconceivably astounding and bizarre. And just that seeing, that self-verifying certainty, just completely and utterly transforms perspective. Without changing anything. Without changing what you do or how you do, or, the different energy patterns you tend to habituate.
Would you call that not judgmental observance?
Yes, but it's not judgmental because the judgment is being withheld, and it's not observance because there's something you're doing that could be some observance as opposed to some non-observance. It's the discovery that there is nothing other than non-judgment. Even judgmental is not actually judgmental. What it actually is inconceivable. And we think of it as being judgmental, but it's infinitely weirder than that. And observance or non-observance is infinitely weirder than that. But yeah, basically, sure, it is that. But it's a discovery that is what there is, rather than some condition or state you are doing or affecting or achieving. I mean, basically, no, even when no one is ever judging their experience just shows up spontaneously. It shows up too fast to judge. It's like, bang, here it is. What's going on now? Damn, I have absolutely no idea. And then there may be all sorts of judgment and reflection and reaction and all that. And that shows up non-judgmentally too. I mean, and then judgment can show up, and judgment shows up non-judgmentally. So, the entire thing is absolutely spontaneous, inherent, and not a result of process. And so we're used to thinking in terms of process. We're used to thinking in terms of this or that and so on. But all that way of approaching is completely inaccurate. And yet there's nothing wrong with doing that, and we'll continue to do it because that's what we do.
There seems to be two aspects to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual teacher, the two things. Point directly to the true nature of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And practices or teaching, whatever protocol, to increase the capacity. At some point, the truth can be understood.
Right.
So, even in Dzogchen, they have whether it's a window or more form kind of teachings before the tricks.
Right.
So, coming to see you for a time, I guess I sort of figured that your preliminary process is the consideration of the teaching.
Well, actually, the preliminary is already occurring. The preliminary has been met by the nature of experience itself. The preliminary is having moments of wild experience. Everyone has moments of wild experience. If no other time when you're going to sleep at night. I mean, when you're sort of drifting off and the world disappears and you're just like, woo! I mean, you're not anywhere, you're not nowhere, it's just nothing. That's the preliminary, having actuality of that kind of, frame of reference-lessness experience. Well, it's not even dissolving, it's just finding yourself outside of a particular orientation. Everyone has that. Or surprise is a good one. I mean, surprise is one of the easiest things in the world. In fact, there's a major absorption practice which consists of startling yourself. You yell really loudly, and if you yell really loudly, even if you know you're going to do it, for a fraction of a second afterwards, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens. Here, let's try this experiment. It's very fun. I'm going to yell really loudly. Ah! Just look very closely, like right after that happens. What's it go? Ah! There's like an instant where it's just, before things sort of reconstitute to an orientation. And basically, in Dzogchen, which is a very exalted Tibetan Buddhist practice, this is one of the recommendations of one of their major practices is the yogi sits down and yells over and over. And the point is not the yelling. The point is not even to being startled. The point is to recognize that moment in the startlement. There's a brief moment of openness, of unqualified, or let's say unoriented experiencing. It's just experience. It's not that the patterns aren't there, but they don't even recognize as patterns. And it shuts down real fast. But with sensitivity, you can notice this. And this is just one. These are all those tricks. That in itself is not particularly important. It's just another trick. Or you can play around with the experience of when you're falling asleep in that. Instead of just falling asleep, when you're falling asleep, let yourself just feel. Just sort of just feel feel what that feels like. Feel that openness, that weird out of control flowing, whatever going on, and so on and so forth. So it's just a matter really of feeling what your experience really feels like. And when you feel that, you will discover what it feels like is a whole lot different than what we think of it as being. It's this very subtle energy that's continually pulsing and cutting. You ever watched like a squid or one of those fish that can change color? You ever watched the way they change color? There's an amazing subtle quality to it. That is, that the energy field, whatever that is present in the experience, does the same thing. It's continually sort of breathing and flowing with texture, just absolutely nonstop. And consciously we are particularly aware of it. We sort of are vaguely aware of it as our moods sort of fluctuating on micro and more macro levels and so on. But it's just a matter of feeling this dynamism, this flow, and how absolutely irrational it is, how absolutely spontaneous it is. And by feeling it, feeling is actually intelligent engagement. And intelligence is not rational intelligence. Intelligence is transrational. Intelligence is the power of irrational knowingness. And so just by feeling experience in subtler modes than we're used to paying attention to, you can learn a whole new, let's say there's revelation. Whole qualities are revealed that are not, dreamt up within your philosophy ratio. So on and so forth.
Well, won't that only become acceptable in the mind becomes more subtle?
No, because the mind already is subtle. The mind may be coarse, but in other portions it's subtle. No one. Coarse mind is like a rock. The rock may be there, but around the rock is non-rock. There can be incredible amounts of coarseness, stupidity, and thickness, but that is present in the context of all kinds of subtleties and nuance that simultaneously exist, and it's all accessible. And it's inherently accessible. It's not because there's no individual that is limited. The consciousness The consciousness is unlimited. It does not need to be developed. It is already developed. It's already totally functional on every level. It's not used to tuning into itself on every level. But in fact, it is with itself already. And so that sounds very paradoxical. It makes no sense. But hey, it makes no sense to do that. It's not about making sense. It's about noticing how astounding this is. And it already is that astounding, and you're already noticing it. So it's just a matter of letting yourself trip on things. I mean, it's really a matter of learning how to let go to some degree of fixation. It's the example of a TV that's on in a room is just a perfect example. You don't have to be staring at the TV just because it's on. You just don't have to be staring at it. You may find yourself staring at it. You may usually stare at it, but you don't have to be. And you can actually look away. And
one may not even know that they're doing it.
No, that's the problem. One doesn't know. It's exactly that. One thinks this is just
Normal.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly the problem. But in actual fact, see, now this is the trick. This is where this yoga is powerful. In actual fact, everyone is looking away from the TV already. Everyone. So no matter how fixated you are in terms of how you orient your energy, in actual fact, you're spacing out all the time. Everyone does. And typically, one may not let themselves acknowledge that or enjoy it, take advantage of it. It's just the deviation and you're back. Or it may not even be noticed because one is so obsessed with the looking at TV mode that these deviations aren't even recognized. But in actual fact, they're occurring. So again, it's not even a matter of something that needs to be developed as an ability to have these occur. They're already occurring. It's just a matter of noticing that it's occurring.
I was just going to say, Peter, that you talked before about subtle apprehension, things that you may not have noticed were going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know what subtle is. You know what I mean? In contrast to anything else, it's all kind of a wash. In the sense that maybe I become aware of things that I think will change that I wasn't aware that I thought they were, those things.
Yeah.
But there is no benefit in putting one's attention there.
No.
Because I'm never going to figure out what they are anyway.
No. So, in actual fact, there's nothing but subtle experience. And non-subtle experience is just subtle experience that we're used to fixating on and defining as non-subtle.
Or having come up with some, name for it.
Yeah.
I think is correct.
There's nothing but subtle energy. There's nothing but subtle experience. And, so the mind creates this duality of the heavy-handed, solid stuff that is used to being oriented to. And then anything that's not used to being looked at is sort of subtle by contrast. But it's not that subtle is better. The point of noticing this is simply to discover that there is more than the ordinary fixations, and that's the only point. Not that what's over there is better than what you're looking at. By all means, go back to what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You like to watch TV, watch TV. It's all the same. TV's subtle energy too.
It's almost, I'm noticing that it's almost the opposite of what I think it is. So
Yeah.
I think
There's a lot of that going around.
it's like something that's subtle. I'm actually, if I just look more closely, I realize that it isn't what I think it is.
Right, and that is the subtlety. The subtlety is when you get to wow, when there's a wow factor. Any degree of wow factor, you're looking at it can be total normalcy and you're still seeing total normalcy, but there's something, anything, wow, and that's bang, that's right away, that's a sure sign that you're outside of your own box. Even if you're still within, you don't need to get out of the box to be outside the box.
Yeah.
You can be in an ordinary way of being with an ordinary thing, and if there's any degree of wow factor, and in actual fact, all experience is pure wow factor. So at any moment, just any degree of wow factor, and you're letting yourself be outside the box. It's not like there's a box here and there's an actual outside. It's really just a matter of letting go of holding things solidly. And again, you don't need to stop holding things solidly. Just notice that even when you're holding them solidly, it's in a context that is beyond that.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me to notice that anxiety in some ways is just me attempting to not have a wow factor.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean.
Oh yeah, we're perverse. We're real perverse in our psychology.
Wow thing that's going on, and I'm going, no, they really could be wow. You know, there's some subtle sort of, feeling that I have that I need to figure out and look at where it came from.
Yeah.
Just manifold, yes. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Humans love to tie themselves up in knots. I mean, literally, we like it. We think it's a good thing. Real true perversion.
Which, yes, really is a real misapprehension. More serious
I like that. You're serious about laughing. Good orientation.
I found at a party I went to this weekend, I had a different, I was more awkward than I usually am. Usually I can, jump in and do the talk, or do this, or ask somebody how they are, or who they are, and, fall into a group. And I was really disoriented, really, quite a bit. And I couldn't join in, exactly. It was all very dismantled, which was a very different experience in that setting for me. It was interesting.
Fun.
I didn't jump into being, oh, I'm awkward, I'm bad, what am I doing, I'm looking bad, what do people think? And I would normally think that way.
Yeah, true.
So I noticed a real difference. I don't know, it wasn't always comfortable, but I wasn't upset about the discomfort either. That was really interesting. I didn't quite have that experience. Huh?
I was at the same party. I usually can't, deal with anybody. I said we just fall into anything.
Right, we were kind of like in reverse roles, actually.
The flow, I usually can't stand, I was able to just flow right into it. It was really very strange. I'm not making something out of it.
Right, just never know.
You never know.
You never know.
It is a really weird experience, all of
Hey. Experience is a weird experience.
It is. I was working with someone today, and I felt this attachment happening in her throat and on her chest, and I felt it was her sister and this, and all of this whole thing happened, and at the end I said something about it. Her sister had died, and it was, there was a real experience that was happening between us in the moment, in this field. It's all very, it's amazing. You can't make that to death out of it. It's really something.
And that really is the punchline. It's the whole point. It's just to notice that you can't make heads or tails out of the experience. And as people, we're so used to pretending or assuming or asserting or just feeling that we can, and we do. And just notice how completely that is just an absurd bravado. In actuality, everything is a vast, astounding, inconceivably weird mystery. And that's just a fact. And even that we try and make sense of it, and we even succeed in making sense of it is more weirdness. And how can that happen?
The preliminary, as you would indicate, or just the nature of I think by
The preliminary is the presence of experiencing.
which is not a practice as such.
No, but on the other hand, it's the only practice if you look at it. So,
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Everybody's probably heard that. What you said about
what I just said?
yeah,
Well,
presences. I didn't know what you said.
the presence of experiencing is the preliminary, is the necessary, necessary prior condition for this yoga, and it's also the practice of the yoga, and it's also the result of the yoga.
The presence of experiencing, meaning being present.
No, meaning this.
Yes, yeah.
The existence means
Being on your head and actually smelling, tasting.
anything, yeah, anything, or not. Being in a coma is the present. Any presence of experiencing is.
So the notion of having to do a sequential series of preparing the ground.
The ground's already prepared.
Whoa! Whoa!
I wish
I love hearing you laugh.
And he turns a little pink.
But there's no notion really of getting it right.
No, there's no right and wrong. It's weirder than that. There's no notion of anything. It's weirder than that. I mean, basically, in this yoga, there's one way to orient to it. If anything seems to be anything, then that's a sign of delusion. And when you notice that nothing is anything in particular, or everything is inconceivably weird, then that's realization. So in this yoga, the way you navigate is anything that seems to be anything is like a red flag. That means check that out and discover the way in which it is more another than what you're holding it to be. At that point, it becomes weird, and the red flag is addressed. And then you look for another red flag, and when you see it, at first there's nothing but red flags.
It's all red flags.
Yeah, and all you need to do is find any red flag you can see through, and that's the entry into the yoga, so to speak.
I don't know how I'm going to continue in my analysis then.
I don't either. Why
I
not?
actually asked you about this once, and you said something really quite lovely because I was expecting you to say something different. And you said something about this subtle human mysterious exchange of energy that therefore could be useful.
Oh yeah.
But in the therapy itself, this thing of what is anything that seems to be anything is suspect.
Right.
I agree. I mean, I feel like I agree. But in the process of, so there is a mysterious exchange between me and the therapist.
Absolutely.
That I can't quantify, but it has more to do with some movement of her shoulder or I mean, in other, but she is in her way, wanting to link it to some part of my life experience or story.
Fine, but just because she's doing that doesn't mean that's what she's doing. Because everything is more and other than it seems to be, without needing to not be what it seems to be.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, it makes it very simple. Everything is already more different than you think and other than you think, without needing to not be the way it seems to, the way it's presenting superficially.
So I have what comes up for me is an idea. Then I have a resistance because I think she has an idea. So
she may have an idea, but she's also more and other than that. She also is beyond the idea. She also is free of the idea. She's also totally outside the idea. So however heavy-handed that she has an idea, she's not actually stuck in that. Even if she thinks she's stuck in it, she isn't actually.
No, she would not say that. Yeah, good.
And also, you thinking that she has an idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your thought.
Yeah. No, it feels like
it's not even problematic. It's just thinking that it is that and that alone is problematic. And it's not problematic in the sense that it needs to not be that way, but that it's problematic in the sense that you can look at it and discover that even while being that way, it's actually other than that way, so it's not actually that way.
Yeah.
And everything, that applies absolutely across the board.
Yeah.
Any and everything whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then you're just in mystery. What's happening? Well, we're sitting here having a talk. Well, that's happening. What else is happening? Everything. I couldn't possibly say it. And that's also happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't need to not be a talk to not be a talk. It is a talk, but it's also not a talk. And everything's like that. Because everything is more and other than itself, without needing to not be itself. It's not an either or. It's not like you need to cancel something out to get to more and other. More and other comes with.
So within any modality or any way of working, there's also the fact that there's a modality there is not a restriction.
Absolutely, it's irrelevant. It's just a partial interpretation, which in no way is true or accurate.
Right.
But no interpretation can create an actual limitation. No limitation cannot exist. This is intrinsically infinite. Everything is infinite. In the most heavy, in the most powerful, in the strongest possible sense. And you can't build finiteness out of blocks of infinity. And since all actual situations, all experience is intrinsically infinite, how can you get limitation? How can you get stuckness? How can you get partiality? You have to claim that it exists, which doesn't make it exist. And even that claim that it exists is infinite and is more than simply being that.
You have a good one.
Of course. Everything.
Experientially, when I have the claim, I do feel a narrowing experientially.
Sure, but that narrowing is actually more and other than it's not an actual narrowing.
Well, what is it?
It's inconceivable infinity, and it's discoverably that if you care to look. But that inconceivable infinity that it is not other than or opposite from the narrowing that you're experiencing it as being. Narrowing is a mode of infinity. Completely unconstrained, open-ended, inclusive mode of infinity. This stuff, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's totally irrational. But that's the point. It is totally irrational. Everything is totally irrational. Nothing makes any sense. And when anything seems to make sense, it's us essentially claiming that it makes sense. No, it's not true.
I have the experience of all conclusions being preposterous and
Sure, preposterous. Preposterous is a good word.
But I do get caught in the thing of, so I have a conclusion about something which seems both preposterous and mundane, and kind of dead and dull and repetitive. So I call that a narrowing.
Right.
And I don't include that the narrowing is also just another one of the boxes of infinity.
Yes, all of those modes are modes of infinity, are infinite modes of infinity, and are more other than themselves, but without needing to not be that way. And all of this is very directly self-verifyingly discoverable, and that is what liberation looks like. Because you can't get stuck in infinity. Infinity doesn't do a very good job of holding you in, and you're infinite too. So you get a hard job of being contained by the infinity that you're pretending to be stuck in. This damn infinity stuck in infinity. Oh no! What am I gonna do?
I like this concept of preliminary. Because everything is preliminary.
Sure. Sure. This is the what's the preliminary? Being born. What's being born? Well, it's this. It's the presence of experience.
It's like the counteracting the force of the system. The usefulness.
I see it as specific non-usefulness because the counteracting of them is actually energizing them. You're giving them more power and more reification by claiming that they exist and they matter sufficient to the extent that they require being addressed. For future reference, sushi and chai is a questionable combination. It's not the TMI, I suppose.
You want some? You got one of them?
Yeah, good, thanks.
You want an ounce?
The problem is probably the ratio. I probably just need more chai.
I get you more.
So do you get sufficient chai? Maybe it'll counterbalance the sushi. No, I'm good. I have a little. Thanks. I was just,
Theatrical?
being theatrical.
It's along the lines of what we've been talking about tonight too. In terms of, not enough attention is sometimes giving more attention to things that we think require less attention is actually kind of good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They're going things more deeply when, my initial apprehension would be that, this doesn't feel good, therefore let me go.
Yeah. Attention is the universal solvent. Things seem to be stuck or problematic when they don't get looked at closely enough. When you look at anything closely enough, when you're within the experience, more intimacy it makes opening. Whatever you look at turns out to be much more than it seems to be. So any kind of stuckness or problems exist by not looking at them enough. They're there and they're held to be there, but you're not actually looking at them. And pain is like that. Pain is really classic. You have a little pain in your tooth or something, whatever, just a little pain. It's a pain and it hurts and it hurts another damn pain. But you're not actually looking at the pain. You're just sort of keeping your distance from it feeling that it hurts. But if you actually go into, well, what's actually present? What is this pain actually? What is actually present? This experience that I'm calling pain. You go into it. It opens. It becomes this weird universe. It doesn't stop, but it's no longer pain or not pain. It's just it's just weirdness. And every and any experience whatsoever responds the same way to attention, or let's say intelligent engagement. Intimate. How about intimate? Intimate engagement. Well, whatever. Anyway, it's not about the words. It's about doing it. To be a certain way, but there's a distance. Yeah, but when you go into what's actually present, it opens up. It morphs. Inevitably. Absolutely inevitable.
Here, just as hanging out with you at the meeting or other venues, there's call it a transmission, whatever you sometimes experience, it's communicated energetically, it's very powerful. Undeniable. But just as energetically, it's a position that we come up in different historical features. Is it similar transmission aspect or energetic communication? But a lot of Vajrayana, especially a lot of the practices seem to have to do with making use of that, through yoga and so forth. Keeping oneself in the energy field of.
But the problem with most of those practices is they're the basis for it is imagination. So like Guru Yoga, you visualize, Guru Rinpoche or whoever, and you do this whole thing in this rays of light and blah blah, whatever, right? Whatever particular practice you're doing, and so it's really your own transmission you're getting because you're putting it there. You're not getting anything from outside of yourself because you're putting there what you're then getting back. So rather than go through all of that circumlocution, experience is already doing that. Experience is already imagining things a million miles a second, right? And is already drinking in those qualities a million miles a second. And what is being projected and what is being drunk in is ultimately transcendental. So experience itself is the ultimate transmission. And so there's nothing. So thinking the dependency upon additional process is just unnecessary structure. You're putting structure where there doesn't need to be structure.
Well, one is habituated toward the ego orientation. The world, the energies of the world can seem to have the opposite transition, or opposite of positive spiritual transition. Right. Resonate with one's own.
Because that is the guru that's being projected,
right.
And that is the energies that are being drunk. But in actuality, those energies are transcendental. And again, they seem to be small because they aren't really being looked at. They're being held mechanically. The necessity, no matter what path or practice you're doing or not, irrespective, the necessity is to really engage intimately with any experience. As long as it's mechanical and being held at a distance, it will be lifeless and dull and stuck. And this applies to anything. It applies to practices. It applies to anything whatsoever. The problem is distancing. Call it psychic, imaginary distancing. Because there's no actual distance. Experience is always with absolute intimacy. But there's this strange auto-hypnotic condition of psychic distance where somehow the observer is being separated from the experience. Somehow, if not, how that could happen, I don't know.
It seems that from what I've gathered, the assumption of Tantra is the dualistic mind is just too treacherous, it's too, way too much romantic. The suspension of distancing is not possible. What all of that seems to be trying to do is okay, you have to have an object, you have to learn something outside yourself, fine. So they give these very
Yeah. Sure, I understand, man. I know the theory and all that. But, again, that's very inefficient because you're trying to teach yourself to do, it's a fish trying to learn how to swim, or a fish trying to learn how to breathe water. It's something you're already doing, and so it's much more efficient to notice you're already doing it rather than go through all this elaborate, long drawn out machinations in order to try to be learning to do something that you're already doing. Because in actuality, you're already completely intimately engaged with experience. And there may be modes in which you're not, where you're sort of having an enforced lack of acknowledgement of that. But even as that's occurring, in other modes you have absolute intimacy with your experience. And in that intimacy, you discover actuality which is intrinsically and inherently transcendental. Experiencing itself is inconceivably impossible. This is so obviously transcendental. How can this be happening? How can this be appearing? How can colors be appearing in the experience? How can it be happening? I mean, just look at the fact that that's an unanswerable question. What does unanswerable mean? It means transcendental. It transcends logic. It transcends reason. It transcends process. How can experience be happening? How can this be? How can this be appearing? You can't answer that question. No one can answer. No one has ever answered that question. No one ever will answer that question. There's no answer. And yet, here it is. Wow. Just wow, that's all.
Just as you were saying to Michael about the transmission he's doing to himself, if you look at all thought that way, and constantly in the belief of all the concepts and definitions of things, we're constantly being bombarded by transmissions that all they are is noise.
Sure.
It's just thought. It's a belief. It's meaningless.
Yeah. Transcendental energy.
It also seems to if you have to buy into the argument for limitation in order to do the practice.
Sure, exactly. That's the problem with it.
So you're reinforcing the argument for limitation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. When you need to generate remedies for afflictions, you're actually validating the afflictions. So you're validating that they are actual afflictions and they're serious enough to warrant giving your time and attention to doing something about it, as opposed to just, shrugging and laughing and saying "fuck it."
So I've always done.
Yeah, me too.
I was talking about it's practice, and I feel like guilt or have to practice something, and then I would look at that. What the hell is that? Why should I do it if I have that feeling?
Yeah.
But I could never.
So you can look down on it. You're a higher yogi. It's all endless subtlety, but that's what we got, so. Just turn it off.
Peter, when you studied with the Dzogchen, I think you mentioned you studied with one Dzogchen teacher.
I didn't study with him. I received the empowerment of Karab Dorje from one guy.
Oh, right. Did he give you a practice or?
No.
Oh.
If he had a Peter, wouldn't have done it.
Good try.
Well, but of course, the three statements of Karab Dorje are the entirety of Dzogchen practice. So, in a certain sense, yes.
Could you refresh my memory on those statements if you remember them?
Sure. This is in Dzogchen. There's three statements, supposedly three statements of this guy, Karab Dorje, and they encapsulate the entirety of Dzogchen in these three statements. The first statement is to basically, well, I don't know them literally, and of course in Tibetan, and I don't recall the translations, a translation literal, but basically the first statement is to recognize, to have direct recognition of the nature of mind, which is a Dzogchen technical phrase, which means the transcendental nature of the fact of experience. Just look around you so the experience and just go, wow, that's what that means. The second statement is literally the statement translates to decide upon one thing. What that means is to discover that that you have recognized as the wow includes every and anything whatsoever. It's not like there's that and then there's something else. It's somehow other than that or outside of that. And the third statement is to rest in the ongoing certainty of self-liberation. In other words, to let the transcendental nature of this continue to be the transcendental nature of this. Not that there's much letting involved, of course.
So that could literally be translated as wow, wow, and wow.
Yeah.
Some more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Dzogchen is really nice because it just means you let experience be experience. And of course that only is meaningful to the extent that you notice or recognize or have any degree of engagement with the fact that this is something amazing. The experience is miraculous, it's bizarre, it's inconceivable. How could this be happening? And just to have any sense of that, primes the pump or sets the stage for the ongoing fact of this. And basically you just let go into the certainty and the lusciousness of this ongoing fact in the face of all of its weirdness as what shows up as human experience and so on and so forth. But at that point that fact is sufficient, and what shows up or not and your attempts at dealing with it or not are just irrelevant because it just comes with. That's just icing on the cake. In other words, what humans think of as the important issues become totally irrelevant secondaries that are just there. And the important issue is the simple fact of experiencing being what it is. And of course that fact is already taken care of itself. So we're off the hook. And that's a great closing line, so I'm going to close because it's time to quit. So thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.